There's a moment that separates the warrior from the pretender. And today you'll discover exactly what that moment is. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to operate on a completely different frequency? They don't struggle with discipline. They don't negotiate with themselves every morning. They simply act, and their actions are terrifyingly consistent. While you're still deciding whether today is the day you'll finally start, they've already finished. While you're making plans to get disciplined, they've been disciplined for so long they've forgotten what weakness feels like. And here's what makes people uncomfortable. They don't look superhuman. They don't have special genetics. They just know something you don't. Something the samurai understood 800 years ago that most people will never discover. It's called Ichinen, the principle of singular focus. And it doesn't just create discipline. It makes discipline inevitable. But I need to warn you right now. This isn't some productivity hack you can try for a week. This is a complete rewiring of how you operate in the world. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Before we go deeper, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and comment below with the one thing you keep saying you'll do but never actually start. This tells me you're serious about transformation, not just entertainment. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Breaking Point. Let me tell you about Marcus. Investment banker, 6-figure income, impressive on paper. But every single night, he'd lie in bed knowing he was living a fraction of the life he was capable of. He had a gym membership he hadn't used in 4 months. Books on his nightstand with bookmarks still on page 12. A meditation app with a 7-day streak from 6 months ago. You know that feeling when you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't even recognize who's staring back. That was Marcus every single morning. Monday, he'd wake up with fire. This is the week everything changes. By Wednesday, the fire was smoke. By Friday, he'd negotiated himself into believing next Monday was a better starting point. The cycle was so predictable he could set his watch to his own failure. His girlfriend noticed it first. You talk about discipline like it's something you're going to find one day. Like it's hidden under a rock somewhere. That comment destroyed him because she was right. He was waiting for discipline to arrive like a package from Amazon. 2 days shipping to a better version of himself. The truth he didn't want to face was that he'd been waiting his entire adult life. Waiting for motivation. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for circumstances to align. Waiting for some magical morning when he'd wake up transformed. But that morning never came because transformation doesn't work that way. And it never will. One day, scrolling through videos at 2 a.m. when he should have been sleeping, Marcus stumbled across something that made him sit up in bed. A documentary about samurai training in feudal Japan. There was one line that hit him like a sword through the chest. The narrator said, "A samurai doesn't decide to be disciplined. He decides once, and then the decision makes itself forever." Marcus replayed that line 7 times. Decides once. That's when he realized what he'd been doing wrong his entire life. He'd been making the same decision over and over and over, thousands of times, and wondering why it exhausted him. What if discipline wasn't about making the right choice repeatedly? What if it was about making one choice so completely that all future choices disappeared? That night, Marcus discovered the principle of Ichinen. And his life was never the same. Chapter 2, The Samurai Secret. In feudal Japan, there was a practice most people never hear about. When a young warrior committed to the samurai path, he went through a ceremony called Keppan. He would write his oath in blood, literally cutting his finger and signing his commitment with his own life force. Then he'd burn incense, and as the smoke rose, He'd speak his vow out loud in front of his master and his fellow warriors. But here's what made it powerful. The vow was I promised to try to train every day. The vow was a statement of my identity. I am samurai. My life is the blade. There is no separation between my existence and my practice. Do you understand what just happened in that ceremony? The decision was made. Not for tomorrow. Not for next month. Forever. From that moment forward, training wasn't something the samurai had to decide to do. It was what samurai are. A fish doesn't decide to swim. A bird doesn't negotiate about flying. And a samurai doesn't debate whether today is a training day. The question simply doesn't exist. Modern neuroscience has finally caught up to what the samurai understood intuitively. Dr. Wendy Wood at USC has spent 30 years studying human behavior, and her research reveals something extraordinary. Your brain categorizes every commitment into two distinct systems. System 1 is automatic, non-conscious, lightning fast. System 2 is deliberate, conscious, exhausting. Every time you make a decision about whether to do something, you're using System 2. And System 2 has limited fuel. It runs on glucose and willpower, and both of those run out by noon. But when you remove the decision entirely, when you shift a behavior into System 1, it becomes automatic. It happens without thought. The samurai ceremony was neuroscience before neuroscience existed. They were hijacking the brain's categorization system, taking their practice out of the negotiation zone and placing it in the identity zone. Marcus read everything he could find about Ichinen. The word translates roughly to one thought or one mind, but the deeper meaning is about singularity of purpose. When all your mental energy flows in one direction without friction, without doubt, without the constant tax of decision-making. He realized why he'd failed at every attempt at consistency. He'd been trying to use willpower as a renewable resource when it's actually a finite fuel that depletes every time you use it. Every morning he woke up and asked himself, should I work out today? Was a morning he drained his tank before he even started. The samurai never asked that question because they'd answered it once, completely, in blood and smoke and witness. Marcus decided to create his own Keppan ceremony. Chapter 3, The Irreversible Commitment. Marcus didn't just write down a goal. He understood that private promises are meaningless because your brain knows you can break them in secret. No one will know. No reputation at stake. No identity on the line. Just you and your shame, and shame is easy to hide. So Marcus made his commitment public in a way that terrified him. He wrote out his declaration, I am a man who trains at 5:30 a.m. every single day for 1 year. No excuses, no exceptions, no negotiations. This is not something I do. This is who I am. He printed it, signed it, dated it. Then he posted it on every social media platform he had. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, even sent it in an email to his entire contact list. His mother called him asking if he was okay. His boss made a joke about it in a meeting. His friends told him he was being dramatic. Perfect. Every single person who saw that declaration became a witness. In feudal Japan, the samurai made his vow in front of his community because the community held him to it. If he broke his word, he didn't just lose his discipline. He lost his honor, his identity, his place in the social structure. Your brain still works the same way it did 800 years ago. When you make something public, failure isn't just uncomfortable. It's a threat to your survival. Our ancestors who lost status in their tribe faced exile, which meant death. That software is still running in your nervous system. Marcus felt it immediately. The morning after posting his declaration, his alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. His body screamed at him. You're tired. You were up late. One day won't matter. But then his brain showed him something. The image of having to post on social media that he'd quit after one day. Having to see his friends at dinner and admit he was just another guy who talks big and delivers nothing. Having to look at his own declaration, signed and dated, and know he wasn't the person he claimed to be. That vision was more painful than getting out of bed. So he got up. But here's what he didn't expect. The public declaration solved the weather problem, but it didn't solve the wind problem. Even with all that social pressure, he was still wasting energy every day deciding when to train. Morning or evening. Before breakfast or after. Now or in 30 minutes. Each tiny decision was a leak in his system. And the samurai had already solved this too. Chapter 4. The Non-Negotiable Hour. There's a reason every samurai woke at the same hour every day. Not because morning training is objectively better than evening training, but because a fixed schedule eliminates the decision. In Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings, he writes, the warrior removes all variables that create hesitation. Time is not debated. It simply is. Marcus chose 5:30 a.m. Not because he loved mornings. He actually hated them. But 5:30 a.m. meant the world was asleep. No texts, no emails, no meetings, no distractions. The hour wasn't about optimization. It was about elimination. Eliminating every possible excuse for doing it later. He set his alarm across the room so he'd have to stand up to turn it off. The first week was brutal. His body fought him with everything it had. That's normal. Your physiology is a pattern recognition machine, and you're forcing it to recognize a new pattern. It resists change like it resists poison because to your primitive brain, change equals danger. Week 2, something shifted. He started waking up 3 minutes before the alarm. His body was beginning to anticipate what came next. By day 15, his feet hit the floor before his conscious mind even engaged. No thought, no negotiation, just movement. This is what most people don't understand about fixed schedules. You think you need to find your perfect time, your chronotype, your biological rhythm. But the real power of a fixed schedule isn't biological. It's psychological. When you train at different times every day, your brain has to make a new decision every single time. When the time is fixed, your brain stops asking questions. A constant can't be negotiated. But Marcus discovered a new problem. His schedule was locked, but he kept changing what he did during that time. Some days, he'd feel like lifting. Other days, cardio sounded better. Maybe some mobility work instead. His brain had found a new negotiating point. Instead of arguing about when, it started arguing about what. The fixed schedule had eliminated half the friction, but his mind was still finding cracks to leak through. He'd removed time as a variable, but not activity. And this is where the samurai teaching on kata becomes radical, because it requires you to do exactly the same thing in exactly the same way until your consciousness surrenders completely. Chapter 5. The Unbreakable Sequence. You think variety keeps things interesting, but variety is actually the crack where consistency dies. Every time you change your routine, your brain has to boot up System 2. Should I do squats or deadlifts today? 30 minutes or 45? High intensity or steady state? Every micro-decision burns glucose. Every choice point is an opportunity for your old self to negotiate its way back in. The samurai understood something that modern fitness culture has forgotten. A kata is a specific sequence of movements performed identically every time. The same strikes, the same footwork, the same breathing, the same pace. You don't modify it based on how you feel. You don't add variety to keep it interesting. You do it the same way whether you're exhausted or energized, sick or healthy, motivated or defeated. Why? Because the kata isn't about the movements. It's about building a pattern so deep in your nervous system that it becomes who you are. Marcus locked down his entire routine. 5 minutes of mobility, 20 minutes of resistance training, 10 minutes of core work, 5 minutes of breathing practice. Same exercises, same order, same timer, same everything. His gym buddies told him he'd get bored. His trainer said he needed more variety for muscle confusion. They didn't understand that boredom was exactly the point. Week 3, his mind revolted. This is stupid. You're not a robot. Mix things up. You're going to burn out. But Marcus had read about the samurai concept of shoshin, beginner's mind. The ability to approach the same practice with fresh attention every time, not because the practice changes, but because you're learning to see deeper into what's already there. Week 5, something broke. Not his discipline, but his resistance. The voice of negotiation didn't disappear. It just got quieter. By week 8, he'd finish his 3rd set of push-ups before he even realized he'd started. The sequence was running itself. This is what people misunderstand about consistency. They think willpower has to last forever, so they try to ration it, save it, manage it. But willpower isn't supposed to last forever. It's supposed to last just long enough for automaticity to take over. Dr. Philippa Lally's research at University College London found that habits take an average of 66 days to become automatic. Not 21, not 30. 66 days of identical repetition before your basal ganglia take over and the behavior starts running on autopilot. Marcus was halfway there. But then life did what life always does. It tested him. Chapter 6. Practice without gaps. Day 43. Marcus woke up with the flu. Fever, chills, body aching. The old version of him would have taken this as a sign from the universe. Your body needs rest. You're sick. Take a break. Come back when you're healthy. But he'd learned something from the samurai principle of renzoku, continuous practice. In the samurai tradition, practice didn't stop because of hardship. It continued through hardship because hardship was part of the practice. When Musashi fought his famous duel on Ganryu Island, he'd been awake for 36 hours traveling by boat. Did he reschedule? Did he ask for better conditions? No, because a warrior doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. He makes any circumstance workable. Marcus dragged himself out of bed at 5:30 a.m. He didn't do his full routine. He couldn't. But he did 5 push-ups. 2 minutes of breathing. 1 minute of stretching. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't impressive. But it was continuous. No gap in the chain. Day 47. He was traveling for work. Hotel gym closed for renovation. Old Marcus would have shrugged and said, "Well, I tried. Nothing I can do." New Marcus did bodyweight exercises in his hotel room at 5:30 a.m. Day 61. His alarm didn't go off. He woke up at 7:00 a.m. in a panic, already late for work. He did his routine in the parking garage of his office building. Suit and tie, between cars, not caring who saw. Because the practice was no longer about convenience. It was about continuation. The samurai knew something that modern psychology is just beginning to understand. The gap is more dangerous than the difficulty. A Stanford University study on habit disruption found that missing one day of a new behavior increases the likelihood of missing the next day by 40%. Miss 2 days, and you're 67% more likely to miss a third. The chain doesn't break because the challenge was too hard. It breaks because you allowed a gap, and in that gap, your old identity climbs back in. Marcus's declaration said 1 year, no exceptions. Not 1 year with reasonable exceptions. Not 1 year unless life gets in the way. 1 year. Period. The commitment was binary. Either he was the person he declared himself to be, or he wasn't. There was no middle ground. This is the part where people started to notice. Chapter 7, The Transformation. Week 12, Marcus's coworkers began commenting. You seem different. Did you get a promotion or something? They couldn't pinpoint what had changed, but they felt it. His presence had shifted. There was a certainty in how he moved through the world. Week 16, his girlfriend said something that stuck with him. It's like you're operating from a different place now. You're not trying anymore. You're just being. She was right. The discipline had stopped being something he did and became something he was. That's when an old friend from college reached out. Hey man, I saw your posts about training every day. That's kind of extreme, don't you think? You need balance. Marcus smiled when he read that message because he finally understood what balance really means. People use the word balance when they want permission to quit. They use it when your consistency makes them uncomfortable because it highlights their inconsistency. Balance isn't about doing a little bit of everything. It's about going all in on what matters and eliminating what doesn't. The samurai didn't have balance. They had total commitment to the path they'd chosen. Everything else fell away. Was that extreme? Yes. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Because you can't be a warrior part-time. You can't be disciplined when it's convenient. You either are or you aren't. Day 180, 6 months into his year commitment, Marcus looked in the mirror and saw someone he didn't recognize. Not because he looked different, though he did, but because the person staring back at him had a quality the old Marcus never had: inevitability. When you see someone who's truly disciplined, you don't see effort. You see flow. You see someone for whom the disciplined action is easier than the undisciplined one. That's what Ichinen creates. Not the ability to force yourself to do hard things, but the transformation into someone for whom those things are no longer hard. They're just what you do. Like breathing. Like blinking. Like existing. A research team at Duke University studying long-term behavior change found that people who maintain new behaviors for more than 6 months show actual structural changes in their brains. The prefrontal cortex, which handles decision-making and willpower, shows less activation during the practiced behavior. Meanwhile, the basal ganglia, which handles automatic processes, shows more activation. In other words, the behavior literally moves from the conscious part of your brain to the automatic part. You're not using less willpower. You're using a different system entirely. Marcus understood now why the samurai ceremony involved blood. The commitment had to be absolute because anything less than absolute would eventually negotiate itself back to zero. Partial commitment is just slow quitting. The ancient warriors knew that you can't be 70% samurai. You can't be mostly disciplined. You either cross the threshold completely, or you don't cross it at all. Chapter 8, The Hardest Test. Day 212. Marcus got the call no one wants to receive. His father had a heart attack. He was flying home immediately. Didn't know how long he'd be gone. Didn't know what he'd be walking into. At the airport at 4:00 a.m., bags thrown together, running on 2 hours of sleep. His alarm buzzed. 5:30 a.m. For the first time in 7 months, every cell in his body screamed to skip it. This is different. This is a real emergency. This is one of those times where discipline doesn't matter. Anyone would understand. He stood there in the terminal, people rushing past him, and he thought about something he'd read in the Hagakure, the book of the samurai. The way of the warrior is in desperateness. 10 men or more cannot kill such a man. It wasn't about sword fighting. It was about commitment. In that moment, Marcus realized that the real test of discipline isn't when things are going well. It's when the world is falling apart. He found a quiet corner near his gate, set his phone timer, and began 5 push-ups. His body was shaking, whether from exhaustion or emotion. He couldn't tell. 2 minutes of breathing. His mind was racing about his father, about what he might find when he landed. 1 minute of stretching. People walking by probably thought he was insane. He didn't care. The practice continued because the practice was no longer about the practice. It was about the promise he'd made to himself. About the identity he'd forged. About proving that even when everything else in his life was uncertain, this one thing remained constant. His father recovered. 3 weeks in the hospital, but he pulled through. During those 3 weeks, Marcus trained in hospital parking lots, hotel gyms, parks at dawn. Nothing was perfect. Everything was continuous. When he finally flew home, something had fundamentally changed. He'd faced the moment where everyone gives themselves permission to quit, and he hadn't taken it. That moment, that choice to continue when continuation seemed impossible, was the moment he stopped being someone who was trying to be disciplined and became someone who simply was disciplined. The difference is everything. Chapter 9, The Ripple Effect. Day 314. Marcus was having dinner with his girlfriend and her parents. Her father, a retired Marine, asked him about his training routine. Marcus explained the year commitment, the daily practice, the Ichinen principle. Her father was quiet for a moment, then said something Marcus will never forget. Son, most people live their entire lives negotiating with themselves. You've stopped negotiating. That's rare. What Marcus hadn't anticipated was how his discipline would affect everything else in his life. He wasn't just consistent with training. He was consistent with everything. Work projects that used to drag on for months were getting finished in weeks. Difficult conversations he used to avoid were happening immediately. Books he'd meant to read were getting read. It wasn't because he had more willpower. It was because the mechanism of consistency had transferred. Dr. Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion has been controversial, but one finding remains solid. People who practice self-control in one domain show improved self-control in other domains. Not because willpower is a muscle that gets stronger, but because you're building a new relationship with commitment itself. When you prove to yourself that you can keep one promise completely, your brain starts to believe you can keep any promise. The identity shift cascades. Marcus's friends noticed it. His coworkers noticed it. His girlfriend noticed it. You're becoming one of those people everyone kind of fears but also respects, she told him. The ones who say they'll do something and everyone knows it's already done. He understood exactly what she meant. There is a level of discipline that makes people uncomfortable because it holds up a mirror to their own inconsistency. Your existence becomes a silent question to everyone around you. If he can do it, why can't I? Most people respond to that question with resentment or dismissal. He's obsessed. He's unbalanced. He's too extreme. But a few people respond differently. 3 of Marcus's co-workers started their own year commitments after watching him. His younger brother asked him to help design a training protocol. Even his girlfriend, who'd initially thought the whole thing was too much, started waking up at 6:00 a.m. to work on her novel. Discipline isn't just personal. It's contagious. When you commit at a level that scares you, you give other people permission to commit at a level that scares them. Chapter 10, Day 365. The morning of Day 365 arrived without fanfare. Marcus woke up at 5:30 a.m. exactly as he had every day for the past year. He did his 5 minutes of mobility, his 20 minutes of resistance work, his 10 minutes of core, his 5 minutes of breathing. Same routine, same order, same intensity. When he finished, he sat in his garage in silence for a few minutes. He'd done it. 365 days of continuous practice. No gaps, no exceptions, no negotiations. But here's what surprised him. He didn't feel relieved that it was over. He felt nothing about it being over because it wasn't over. The year commitment had been the tool to forge the identity, but the identity was now permanent. He wasn't going back to the person he used to be because that person didn't exist anymore. The neural pathways had been rewritten. The habit had become automaticity. The discipline had become nature. That night, he sat down and wrote a message to post on the same social media platforms where he'd made his declaration a year earlier. This is what he wrote. 365 days ago, I made a public commitment that terrified me. I said I was a man who trained every single day for a year, no matter what. Today marks day 365. But this post isn't about completion. It's about transformation. The year wasn't the goal. The year was the forge. What I learned was that discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do hard things repeatedly. It's about deciding once, so completely, that future decisions disappear. It's about removing negotiation as an option. It's about shifting behavior from the conscious mind to the automatic mind. The samurai understood this 800 years ago. They called it Ichinen. One thought, one mind, one commitment. No division, no doubt, no debate. I started this journey as someone who couldn't stick to anything for more than 2 weeks. I'm ending it as someone who doesn't remember what it feels like to negotiate with myself anymore. To everyone who watched, who commented, who called me extreme, thank you. You were right. It was extreme. It had to be. Because incremental commitment creates incremental results. And I didn't want incremental. I wanted complete. If you're reading this and you're tired of being the person who starts things but never finishes them, I want you to understand something. You don't have a discipline problem. You have a decision problem. You keep making the same decision over and over, burning energy, draining willpower, wondering why it's so hard. Make the decision once. Make it in blood if you have to. Make it public so you can't hide. Make it absolute so your brain stops looking for loopholes. Then watch what happens when you remove negotiation from your life. You'll become someone you don't recognize. Someone others don't recognize. Someone who operates at a frequency that makes people uncomfortable. Good. That discomfort is proof you've crossed a threshold most people never even approach. Starting tomorrow, day 366, I'll be there at 5:30 a.m. Not because I have to, because it's who I am. Chapter 11, The Path Forward. The post went viral in ways Marcus never expected. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of messages. Some people inspired. Some people defensive. Some people angry that someone would claim discipline could be this simple. But it's not simple. It's devastatingly hard. That's the point. What Marcus discovered, what the samurai knew, what every person who has ever achieved unbreakable consistency eventually learns, is that the transformation happens in the space between who you are and who you decide to be. That space is measured not in distance but in commitment. Most people try to cross that space slowly, carefully, keeping one foot in their old identity just in case the new one doesn't work out. They try to become disciplined while still leaving room for their undisciplined self to come back. That strategy has a 0% success rate. The only way across is to burn the bridge behind you. To make the commitment so complete, so public, so irreversible that going back becomes more painful than moving forward. This is what Ichinen teaches. This is what the samurai ceremony encoded. This is what Marcus lived for 365 days. One decision made so absolutely that it eliminates all future decisions. One commitment held so completely that it becomes identity. One practice performed so consistently that it becomes automatic. You're not building discipline. You're building a new self. And that process requires the death of your old self. Most people aren't willing to make that trade. They want to become disciplined without losing their option to be undisciplined. They want the transformation without the sacrifice. But transformation is sacrifice. It's the old you dying so the new you can live. The samurai understood this literally. When a warrior committed to the path, his old life ended. His old name was sometimes even erased. He became his practice. There was no separation between the person and the path. You probably won't need to go that far. But you do need to go far enough that turning back feels impossible. You do need to make it public enough that failure has real consequences. You do need to make it specific enough that your brain can't negotiate. And you need to sustain it long enough that automaticity takes over and discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. How long is long enough? The research says 66 days on average for simple behaviors, longer for complex ones. Marcus committed to a year because he knew he needed to go beyond the point where most people quit. He needed to prove to himself that he could sustain something past the point where it was hard, past the point where it was interesting, past the point where anyone was watching, past every exit ramp his mind would offer him. If you want this, if you genuinely want to become someone who doesn't negotiate with themselves anymore, here's what you do. First, choose one practice. Not 5, not 3, 1. Make it specific, make it measurable, make it daily. Second, decide on a time. Exact time, non-negotiable, no flexibility. The time is now a constant, not a variable. Third, lock down the sequence. Same practice, same order, same duration, every single time. Remove variety as an option for the commitment period. Fourth, make it public. Post it where people will see it. Tell people who will hold you accountable. Make failure socially costly. Fifth, commit to a duration that scares you. Not a month, not 12 weeks, a length of time that feels unreasonable. 6 months, a year, whatever makes you think I don't know if I can actually do that. Good, that's the right duration. Sixth, pre-solve every obstacle. Write down every reason you failed before and create a predetermined response. When X happens, I do Y. No decisions in the moment. And seventh, understand that there will be a moment, probably many moments, where continuing seems impossible. Where every part of you screams to stop. Where the universe itself seems to be giving you permission to quit. That moment is the test. Not of your discipline, but of your decision. Did you really decide? Or did you just make a wish? A wish breaks under pressure. A decision holds. The samurai standing in the ceremony, blood on his fingers, smoke rising, community witnessing, made a decision. Everything after that was just execution. You're about to make yours. Make it count. Chapter 12. The Warrior You Become. 6 months after Marcus completed his year, he got a message from someone he'd never met. I started my own commitment because of your post. I'm on day 93. I finally understand what you meant about identity shift. I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. Thank you for showing me this was possible. Marcus read that message 3 times. He thought about how different his life would be if he'd never discovered Ichinen, if he'd never made that first terrifying public declaration, if he'd allowed himself one gap in the chain. He thought about the version of himself that would still be lying in bed hitting snooze, still making plans he'd never execute, still wondering why discipline was so hard for everyone else but impossible for him. That version of Marcus was dead. He didn't miss him. There's a story about a samurai who was asked by a student, "Master, when did you become a master?" The samurai thought for a long moment and then said, "The day I stopped seeing mastery as a destination I would one day reach and started seeing it as a path I walk every day. The day I stopped trying to become and simply was." That's what Ichinen gives you. Not the ability to do hard things, but the transformation into someone for whom those things are no longer hard. They're just the path. And you're just walking it. Every single day. Without negotiation, without debate, without the constant exhausting question of whether today is the day. Today is always the day. Because you decided. Once, completely, forever. Marcus is still training at 5:30 a.m. Not because he's still proving something, but because 5:30 a.m. is when warriors wake. And he's a warrior now. That identity was forged in 365 days of continuous practice, but it will last the rest of his life. This is available to you. Not because you're special or gifted or different from anyone else, but because the mechanism of transformation is universal. The samurai knew it. Marcus discovered it. And now you know it. The only question left is whether you'll use it. Whether you'll make that one decision that eliminates all future decisions. Whether you'll commit so completely that continuing becomes easier than quitting. Whether you'll practice so consistently that discipline becomes automatic. Whether you'll walk through the fire of transformation and come out the other side as someone you don't recognize. Someone others fear and respect. Someone who operates on a different frequency. The person who never negotiates. The person who never stops. The person who simply is. That person is waiting on the other side of your decision. The ancient samurai rule that makes discipline automatic isn't complicated. It's just complete. Decide once. Decide publicly. Decide irreversibly. Then let the decision make itself forever. If this message changed how you think about discipline and commitment, subscribe to this channel and activate notifications for future content that will transform you. And tell me in the comments, what is the one decision you're ready to make that will eliminate all future decisions? What commitment will you declare that terrifies you? What practice will you begin that will transform you into someone you don't recognize? Remember, the discipline that scares others is the only discipline worth having. The commitment that seems extreme is the only commitment strong enough to last. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you at 5:30 a.m.